If the public thinks that I don't represent them, they'll replace me. That is our system. That's what the founding fathers that my friend on the far right here likes to tell us all the time. Respect your founding fathers. They did not put term limits in the Constitution of the United States because they believed the people could make that judgment. They believed the people could judge the performance of its representatives, the performance of its senators, and reelect them or not based upon that judgment. I believe in the people's judgment. The gentleman to my far right, Mr. Lawler, says I said something at Northern High School, which I never said. Never said that. Those of you who were there, we watched the television tape of that, you're welcome to do it. I never said that. I care very deeply about what the people think. I care very deeply about representing working Americans. I care very deeply about people, for instance, who have pre-existing conditions and can't get insurance. I care very deeply about young people who can't find a job and are 23, 24, can't get insurance. I care very deeply about somebody who has cancer and can't get coverage. So, yes, I care.
Thank you. And let me remind the candidates that the audience is asking the questions of you, not of each other. And I would like to remind the folks in the hall and outside, I know it's cold outside, but please restrain your responses to some of these questions. Thank you. This question will begin with Mr. Schickel, and the question is, what do you believe that Congress must do first to tackle the problem of the national debt?
First and foremost, I think we need to cut spending. We don't have a choice in this matter as far as I'm concerned. We're spending far more money than we have. We're binge borrowing from places like China. We owe these countries untold amounts of money, and unless we cut spending and start paying down this debt, we're not going to have a country as far as I'm concerned. Now, I've made many spending cut proposals, and a few months ago, Miss Nancy Pelosi said that we're all going to have to suffer together. Well, I think we should take her up on that offer. I think we can immediately start by cutting pay for president, vice president, members of the House and Senate down to $100,000 a year with a permanent cap on $100,000 a year. I think we do things like taking away pensions for members of the House and Senate. I think we can do away with extra pay for serving on committees. I think we can do away with all types of little perks that our elected officials get. And while we're doing that, we can also start on big ticket items like bringing our troops home from overseas, which Mr. Hoyer's party promised they were going to do 4 years ago and haven't done yet. At the same time, we can start ending programs like the war on drugs, which is taking up tens of billions of dollars of our tax dollars every year. And all we're doing is handing over power to street-level gangs and international cartels that are now starting to assault our borders.
Thank you. Mr. Hoyer.
Well, the specifics to which the previous speaker spoke, of course, are interesting, but not addressing the real problem. This deficit that confronts us is dangerous and must be dealt with. We adopted a program in 1993 that I voted for, and no Republican voted for, which created a $5.6 trillion surplus as of March of 2001. A $5.6 trillion surplus. The policies that we then pursued thereafter raised the national debt by $5 trillion, from 5.7 to $10.7 trillion, and ran a deep deficit every year, $2.68 trillion to be exact. I have made a speech just about 2 months ago which said that everything needed to be on the table. The only thing that shouldn't be on the table, in my view, is interest on the national debt. America will pay its bills and meet our obligations. That's the kind of country we are. But at the same time, we need to consider all of the items of expenditure on our national table. Why? Because it is not only an intellectually bankrupt policy, but an immoral policy to keep spending without paying. That's why we adopted statutory pay-go. That's why we have put in place a commission to make recommendations on December 1st about how we reduce the deficit, and that's why we cut $8 billion from the President's budget in our budget enforcement resolution.
Thank you. Mr. Lawler.
If we're going to do something about the debt, the national debt, we have to take the debt seriously. And in that regard, I think there's some similarities, but at least in word, but in practice and in application, that's where the problem is. I think you start by taking it seriously and say to yourself this: if in fact the general populace of America is struggling right now with one of the worst deficits that our nation has seen since the Depression, then you don't vote yourself a pay increase. That's a good place to start. We have to deal with consumer confidence that's out there. It's very, very low, which means people aren't spending their money. The average business nationwide is holding on to almost $1.74 trillion in expenditures that they're holding back. They're not creating jobs. They're not being inventive and innovative because there's no confidence in the current administration and the leadership in Congress. So we have to make some deep-seated changes and take balancing the budget seriously. There's $60 billion out there in unspent stimulus. Why haven't we retracted that back? Another $10 billion in federal vehicles. Why haven't we retracted that back? Another $2.5 billion in federally owned land that we're not using. Why haven't we done something with that? Another $3.5 million for a ballpark that was built out in Arizona, the Diamondbacks, that if you go to watch the Arizona Diamondbacks playing it, you'd be charged a cover charge. So much is not being revealed to everyday citizens that's tucked into these bills. And then when we uncover those poor spending habits, we're called everything but a child of God. If we're going to take this thing seriously, let's look at what we're doing and make sure we're making the hard decisions to balance the budget.
Mr. Hoyer, on illegal immigrants, do you think there should be legislation requiring the reporting of illegal aliens who receive medical treatment?
I think there should be reporting. We ought to know that. As you know, illegal immigrants on the health care bill are not eligible for dollars. We obviously have to spend money on those who are either legally here but are citizens of this country. So from that standpoint, the answer, I suppose, is yes in terms of reporting. However, having said that, what we need to do is stop illegal immigrants from coming into the United States of America. We have to secure our borders, which is why we've added 1,000 new border agents. We've substantially increased the budget for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency so that we would make sure that we reduce this very substantial number of people coming into our country, which we don't know about. That's, first of all, a great concern with respect to terrorism and our security, and it's secondly a tremendous burden on our public expenses. From that standpoint, we have to get a handle on our borders. And we are taking steps to do that. Very frankly, immigration went up during the early part of this last decade. Illegal immigration. So the answer is yes.
Mr. Lawler.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. That in rhetoric and discussion, there's a lot of similarities. But in actuality or in application, there's none. When it comes to illegal immigration, it's one of the largest debts that our nation has to endure every single year. If we don't take immigration seriously and do something about it, like providing the borders, both the north and southern borders with proper securities, we need to step up and provide our states and empower our governors on these border states to do the right thing. That's a federal responsibility. While our states are carrying the load on their own, I don't know. If we can go over to Afghanistan and Iraq, and I can tell you this as a Marine officer, secure borders there, why can't we do it here in our own homeland? It's because we're not taking it seriously. My congressman voted no on building a fence along the Mexican border, September 2006. Voted no on preventing tipping off of Mexicans to the Minuteman Project. Voted no on reporting illegal aliens who receive hospital treatment, but yet he just said yes, he would. That's the frustrating part for me as a Marine officer. I do all I can to give information that's accurate and true, and it's very difficult when that is not returned in kind.
Mr. Schickel.
Could you please repeat the question? I want to make sure I heard it correctly.
On illegal immigrants, do you think there should be legislation requiring the reporting of illegal aliens who receive medical treatment?
I honestly don't know because I don't know to what purpose that would be used for. The question is a little unclear in my mind. What I can say and what I have said before is that we can't expect American citizens to follow the laws of this nation if we don't expect non-citizens to follow the laws of this nation. We cannot allow people to be living here illegally. We cannot allow people to be living here undocumented, not knowing where they came from. Regardless of what country it is, it doesn't matter if it's from Mexico or Zimbabwe or wherever it is, it just does not matter. We cannot allow people to be living in this country illegally without documentation and not knowing what kind of people are coming into our nation. We have a lot of unscrupulous and undesirable people that were born here. We don't need more people like that coming into our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. This question will begin with Mr. Lawler. The United States is famous for team sports. We love football, basketball, baseball. We can agree that there is loyalty to one's team. That being said, the country is sick and tired of partisan politics. Putting parties aside, what separates you as a person? How do you think and discern your decisions on your own, separate from party?
What an outstanding question, because I've often said to anyone who would listen that I consider myself an American candidate who happens to be conservative and Republican. For me, our country has to come first, because many of the issues that we face, especially where we go from here, have very little to do with partisan politics, as much as it has to do with common sense answers that you and I can figure out sitting around our dinner table. And anytime we bring parties in and say, well, we were better under this Democrat president or this Republican president, at this case and at this time in our nation's history, it's always better if we do things the American way. I remember being in Kosovo. I tell you, when you're in a foxhole next to someone and the bullets start flying, you don't care if they're Republican or Democrat. You don't care what gender they are or race. You just want to make sure you can get out of there together and get back home to your families. Some of the things that separate me is my love for our country, my respect for the direction we're going, the fact that I'm willing to serve and put my life on the line for freedom, the Constitution, and my family. And even still, thank you, sir, even still, it's very important for us to follow the governing of our Constitution. It's not just something that we should refer to. It's something that we should absolutely use as a benchmark for where we need to go in the future. We cannot make up the rules as we go along. A balanced budget, that's not partisan. It's what you do at home. If you don't have as much revenue coming in as expenses going out, you cut somewhere on the expense line, not try to find a way to print more money. All of these things, in my opinion, help to separate myself. I'm not going to say from everyone, but I'll certainly say that's the principles I stand on.
Thank you. Mr. Schickel.
The reason I became a libertarian is because I believe in the principles of the Libertarian Party, and that is that the wants of the individual supersede the desires of the state. Now, there are many other principles, but that's one of the ones I hold dearest to me. Now, my decision-making and my party, or as regards to my party, are pretty much one and the same. I believe that the Libertarian Party is the only party that actually fights for the rights of the individual in this country. Now, I will not back away from that, and I will continue to be a libertarian. I will continue to stand for those principles as long as I feel that my party actually embodies those principles.
Thank you. Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you very much. I think bipartisanship is an objective that we all ought to seek. It takes two, however, to tango. It takes both sides to agree to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. But my friend, Mr. Lawler, I don't think really got to the question. The issue is whether a party that has opposed banking reform, a party that has opposed overwhelmingly credit card reform, so average working Americans were protected from that, a party that opposed imposing statutory pay-go so that we'd have to pay for things as we bought, that originally supported it when they were sponsoring it, but opposed it when Kent Conrad, a Democrat in the United States and a conservative Democrat from North Dakota, was sponsoring. Rhetoric is easy. Substance is tough. Having nice speeches sound good, but it doesn't get you